Picture this. You're buckling your 6-year-old into the car after his birthday party at school. He should be buzzing with sugar-high energy, chattering about cupcakes and friends. Instead, he's silent. His paper crown sits crooked on his head. His eyes won't meet yours. Then he whispers, "Mrs. Harrow sang a monkey song about me." Your stomach drops. Your hands freeze on the seatbelt. And in that moment, everything changes. What do you do when your child's birthday becomes a day he learns what it feels like to be humiliated in front of his entire class? If you've ever had to fight for your child when no one else would, drop a comment right now, because this story is going to shake you. Let me take you back to that Monday morning in September. Wellington Primary School sat in one of those quiet Florida suburbs where everyone knew everyone, where safety felt like a given, where trust was a default setting. Classroom 2B was buzzing with the kind of electric energy that only first graders on a birthday can generate. 6-year-old Dorian Price walked through that door wearing a gap-toothed smile that could light up the entire hallway. On his head sat a glossy paper crown, the kind that leaves glitter on your fingers and makes you feel like royalty for a day. His teacher, Mrs. Harrow, had been at Wellington for nearly 3 decades. She was the kind of educator parents requested by name. Kids love her eccentric reading voices, her mismatched sweaters that somehow always coordinated, her ability to turn even the most mundane Monday into something magical. And birthdays? Birthdays were her specialty. Over the years, Mrs. Harrow had developed a tradition, one she'd carried from her own childhood. After the class sang the traditional happy birthday, she'd ask the birthday child, "Would you like the funny version?" Most kids nodded enthusiastically, having heard whispers from older siblings about the silly song that made everyone laugh. That morning, as vanilla cupcakes with rainbow sprinkles made their way around the circle, the class launched into familiar melody. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you." Dorian's smile stretched wider with every note. This was his moment, his day. When the song ended, Mrs. Harrow leaned in with a playful twinkle in her eye. "Would you like the funny version, Dorian?" He nodded. Of course he did. His older cousin had told him about it. It was supposed to be hilarious. The room hummed with anticipation. Even the kids who'd already had their birthdays leaned in, ready to laugh. But what happened next would transform Jocelyn Price from a trusting parent into a warrior who refused to stay silent. Mrs. Harrow stood up with theatrical flair, the way she did when she was about to do something she thought was entertaining. The kids giggled in anticipation. Then she sang, "Happy birthday to you. You live in a zoo, you look like a monkey, and you smell like one too." A few kids erupted in giggles. A few more clapped their hands. Some looked confused, waiting for Dorian to laugh, so they'd know it was okay to laugh too. But Dorian didn't laugh. He sat frozen in his tiny chair, his smile faltering like a candle flame in the wind. Suddenly, every pair of eyes in that room felt like a spotlight, hot, exposing, inescapable. His stomach twisted in a way he couldn't name. He didn't understand why the words made him feel small, why his throat felt tight, why he wanted to disappear beneath his desk. It was supposed to be funny. Everyone said it was funny. So why did it feel like something had just broken inside him? The moment passed. Mrs. Harrow distributed cupcakes. The sugar rush kicked in. Construction paper crowns wilted with sweat during recess. By the time the final bell rang, most of the class had forgotten the song entirely. But Dorian hadn't. When Jocelyn pulled up to the pickup line that afternoon, she spotted her son immediately. A mother knows. She knows the difference between tired and troubled, between quiet and wounded. Dorian climbed into the back seat without his usual explosion of chatter about who played what at recess and who shared their snack. She adjusted the rear-view mirror to catch his eyes. "Hey, birthday boy, how was your day?" "Fine," he mumbled, staring at his lap. Jocelyn's maternal radar went into overdrive. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. "Just fine? You had cupcakes and a crown and everything. What happened, sweetheart?" There was a long pause. Then, barely audible, Mrs. Harrow sang a monkey song. Jocelyn's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "A monkey song? What do you mean?" Dorian's voice was small, confused, heard in a way he couldn't articulate. She said I live in a zoo and look like a monkey and smell like one. Everyone was looking at me. The air in the car changed. Jocelyn felt her chest constrict, felt that primal protective instinct surge through her veins like electricity. She wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. She wanted to give Mrs. Harrow, the beloved teacher, the veteran educator, the benefit of the doubt, but her gut was screaming that something was deeply, dangerously wrong. She kept her voice steady, gentle. Tell me exactly what happened, baby, from the beginning. As Dorian recounted the moment, Jocelyn felt the ground shift beneath her. She saw her son's hurt. She heard his confusion. And she understood with crystal clarity that this wasn't just about a silly song. This was about her black son being compared to a monkey in front of his peers. This was about a wound that wouldn't heal with a bandage and a kiss. Have you ever felt that gut punch when you realize someone hurt your child, even if they didn't mean to? Hit that like button if you understand that maternal rage that rises up when nobody else seems to see the problem. By the time they pulled into the driveway, Jocelyn had made a decision. She wasn't going to let this slide. She wasn't going to accept it was just a joke, or we've always done it this way. Because here's what she knew that Mrs. Harrow apparently didn't. Intent doesn't erase impact, and her son's pain wasn't up for negotiation. Jocelyn didn't sleep that night, and what she discovered kept her awake for entirely different reasons. After tucking Dorian in and kissing his forehead twice for good measure, she called her sister, a high school vice principal in Jacksonville who'd spent her career navigating the complex terrain of education, race, and cultural sensitivity. Jocelyn explained what happened, her voice tight with controlled emotion. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Joss, her sister said softly, carefully, that song is not just silly. Those words have a history, especially for black kids. Comparing black children to monkeys, to animals. It's been used for generations to dehumanize, to bully, to make children feel less than. It's a tool of racism, whether people realize it or not. The words hit Jocelyn like a physical blow. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach churn with a mixture of fury and grief. She stayed up until 3 a.m, laptop glowing in the darkness, scrolling through article after article, parent forums, academic studies, personal testimonies. The internet was filled with stories, adults recounting their own childhood memories of that exact song, of teachers and relatives who sang it without understanding the weight it carried. Some commenters defended it. We sang it all the time. It was harmless fun. But most told a different story. Stories of feeling singled out. Stories of understanding, even at 6 or 7 years old, that they were being mocked. Stories of the subtle, insidious ways racist imagery gets packaged as innocent tradition. One woman wrote, I was the only black kid in my class. When my teacher sang that song, I knew exactly what it meant. I was 35 before I could enjoy my birthday again. Jocelyn's vision blurred with tears. How many children had been hurt by this? How many parents had brushed it off, trusting that teachers knew better? She read about the historical use of simian imagery to dehumanize black people. She learned about the scientific racism of the past that had justified slavery and segregation by claiming black people were less evolved, more animalistic. She discovered that this wasn't ancient history. These tropes were still weaponized in political cartoons, social media, and yes, even in classrooms. By dawn, Jocelyn's exhaustion had transformed into steel-edged resolve. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was armed with knowledge, with context, with an understanding of exactly why that silly song had devastated her son. She rehearsed what she'd say. She steadied her breathing. She reminded herself that she had every right to be furious, every right to demand better. And then she got dressed, dropped Dorian off at school with an extra-long hug, and walked straight into the main office. I need to speak with Mrs. Harrow, she told the secretary, her voice calm but unyielding. Face to face. Today. The meeting happened during Mrs. Harrow's planning period. Jocelyn sat across from the teacher in a small conference room that smelled like old coffee and copy machine toner. Her hands were folded on the table, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Harrow looked nervous, uncertain. She'd been teaching long enough to recognize when a parent wasn't there for a casual chat. Mrs. Price, I understand you wanted to talk about yesterday? Jocelyn took a breath. She'd promised herself she wouldn't yell, wouldn't let emotion cloud her message. This wasn't about making Mrs. Harrow feel attacked. This was about making her understand. Yesterday was my son's birthday, Jocelyn began, her voice steady. He came to school excited. He left feeling humiliated, and I need you to understand why. She described Dorian's reaction. She explained what she'd learned about the history of that song, about the painful racial undertones that Mrs. Harrow had apparently never considered. She talked about the dehumanization of black children, about how casually racism gets dressed up as tradition. To her credit, Mrs. Harrow didn't get defensive. Her face went pale. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them to her cheeks. I had no idea, she whispered. We used to sing that song when I was a kid. My grandmother taught it to me. I thought it was just silly, just a funny little thing to make birthdays special. I never meant to hurt Dorian. I never meant any harm. Jocelyn's expression softened, but only slightly. I believe you didn't mean harm, Mrs. Harrow. But here's what I need you to understand. Intent doesn't erase impact. My son was hurt. He felt humiliated. And I didn't know isn't good enough when you're responsible for teaching and protecting children. The words hung in the air between them. You're right, Mrs. Harrow said, tears welling in her eyes. You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. I will apologize to Dorian. I will never sing that song again. But for Jocelyn, and for Dorian, the apology, while necessary, couldn't undo the harm that was already done. What happened next surprised everyone. Jocelyn didn't keep the incident quiet. She didn't accept the apology and move on like nothing had happened. Instead, she posted about it in a local parenting group, careful not to name names but honest about what had occurred. Within hours, the comments section exploded. Hundreds of responses poured in. Parents, educators, community members all weighing in. Some defended the song. This is ridiculous. It's just a kid's song. But far more shared their own stories. Adults recounted being the child in the classroom who felt targeted, othered, singled out by that exact song. Parents of black children described the exhausting, constant work of educating teachers who should already know better. Educators admitted they'd sung the song for years without ever considering its implications. The post was shared, then shared again, then picked up by a local news blog. Wellington Primary's principal, Mrs. Duke, found herself in crisis management mode. She called an emergency faculty meeting that Friday, bringing a consultant to discuss cultural sensitivity, implicit bias, and the deeply rooted implications of certain childhood traditions. The district launched its own investigation, not to punish Mrs. Harrow, but to understand how this gap in awareness had persisted for so long. If you believe parents should speak up when something's wrong, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it makes people defensive, leave a comment saying, I'd do the same. Let's normalize protecting our children and demanding better from the systems that serve them. In the weeks that followed, Jocelyn faced a barrage of emotions that no parent should have to navigate. Relief that she'd spoken up. Guilt that Dorian had been hurt in the first place. Anger that it had taken her son's pain to spark this conversation. Pride that she refused to stay silent. The school offered to move Dorian to another classroom, a decision that gutted Jocelyn even as she accepted it. He'd made friends in Mrs. Harrow's class. He'd been thriving there before the incident. Why should he be the one uprooted? But she also knew that staying in that classroom, seeing that teacher every day, might reopen the wound before it had time to heal. So she agreed, her heart heavy with the unfairness of it all. Dorian's new teacher, Miss Chun, was younger, more attuned to the complexities of cultural awareness. She listened carefully when Jocelyn explained what had happened, nodding with understanding rather than defensiveness. I'm so sorry he went through that, Miss Chun said. I promise you, this classroom will be a safe space for him. And slowly, painfully, it was. Dorian made new friends. He laughed again. He started raising his hand in class, his confidence rebuilding one day at a time. At home, Jocelyn had gentle conversations with him about using his voice, about the difference between harmless jokes and harmful ones, about how to protect himself and stand up for others. But Jocelyn didn't stop there. She didn't just fight for her son and then retreat into silence. She joined Wellington Primary's PDA. She volunteered for the newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Committee. She showed up to meetings with research, with resources, with a determination to help teachers understand the histories and lived experiences or lessons, intentionally or not, carried into classroom. Some parents rolled their eyes. Some muttered about political correctness gone mad. But many more thanked her privately, in parking lot conversations and hurried text messages, for doing the hard work they'd been too afraid to do themselves. Wellington Primary changed its policies. Birthday celebrations were still allowed, but teachers received training on culturally sensitive practices. The monkey song was explicitly banned. Other questionable traditions were examined and, when necessary, retired. It wasn't a perfect transformation. Change never is. But it was real and it mattered. The ripple effect spread beyond Wellington. Other schools in the district adopted similar policies. Parent groups in neighboring towns started having their own difficult conversations about tradition versus harm, all because one mother refused to let her son's pain be dismissed as no big deal. Jocelyn didn't set out to be an activist. She didn't wake up that morning planning to challenge systemic issues or spark district-wide policy changes. She just refused to accept that her son's hurt was the price of maintaining tradition, and that refusal changed everything. Years later, on a warm October evening, Wellington Primary hosted its annual Family Heritage Night. The gymnasium was decorated with flags from around the world, tables laden with dishes representing dozens of cultures, the air filled with music and laughter, and the beautiful chaos of community. Jocelyn stood near the back of the room, watching the stage where student representatives from each grade level shared stories about their families, their traditions, their identities. And then Dorian walked onto that stage. He wasn't 6 anymore. He was tall now, his gap-toothed smile replaced by straight teeth and the kind of confidence that comes from being truly seen and valued. He wore a shirt that read, "Be kind," in bold letters, and when he spoke into the microphone, his voice was clear and strong. "Hi, I'm Dorian Price, and I want to talk to you about the power of speaking up," he began. The room quieted. Even the youngest children seemed to sense that what he was about to say mattered. When I was in first grade, something happened on my birthday that made me feel really small, Dorian continued. Someone said something that hurt me, even though they didn't mean to hurt me. And for a while, I felt like maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything. Maybe I was supposed to just smile and pretend it was okay. Jocelyn's eyes filled with tears. She watched her son, her brave, beautiful son, share a story with a room full of people who needed to hear it. But my mom taught me that it's okay to speak up when something hurts you. It's okay to say, "That's not right." And it's okay to ask adults to do better, even when they're teachers or people you respect. He paused, looking directly at the first graders sitting cross-legged on the floor. So if something ever makes you feel bad, if someone says something mean or does something that hurts, I want you to know you can use your voice. You can tell someone. You matter enough to be heard. The applause started slowly, then built into a wave that filled the gymnasium. Parents stood. Teachers wiped their eyes. And Jocelyn felt her heart swell with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. This was why she'd fought. This was why she refused to stay silent, refused to accept easy apologies and empty promises. Not just for Dorian, though he was always the center of it, but for every child who would come after him. For every kid who would walk into Wellington Primary and deserve to feel celebrated, not humiliated. For every parent who would now have language and precedent to advocate for their own children. One conversation had sparked a revolution. One mother's refusal to accept the status quo had rewritten the rules. As the evening wound down and families began to pack up their dishes and gather their children, the new principal, Mrs. Duke had retired the year before, approached Jocelyn. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for not letting us off the hook. Thank you for making us better." Jocelyn smiled, but her response was firm. "I didn't do it to make you better. I did it to protect my son. The fact that it helped everyone else, that's just a bonus. Because that's the truth about advocacy, about standing up when it's uncomfortable, about refusing to let tradition trump humanity. You don't do it for recognition. You don't do it for thanks. You do it because love demands it. Because your child's dignity is non-negotiable. Because silence is complicity. And some battles are too important to walk away from. The monkey birthday song was never sung at Wellington Primary again. But more than that, the culture shifted. Teachers asked questions before introducing old traditions. Parents felt empowered to speak up when something felt wrong. Children learned that their voices mattered, that their experiences were valid. That discomfort with the status quo wasn't something to be ashamed of. And Dorian? Dorian grew up knowing that his mother had fought for him, that his pain had mattered, that he was worth defending. That's a lesson that lasts a lifetime. Jocelyn Price didn't wait for permission to protect her son. She didn't apologize for making people uncomfortable. She didn't accept "we've always done it this way" as a reason to keep doing harm. She just showed up, fierce, focused, and unwilling to let her child's pain be dismissed. This story, inspired by real events, is a testament to the extraordinary power of ordinary people refusing to stay silent. It's about the courage it takes to challenge beloved traditions when those traditions cause harm. It's about the exhausting, essential work of teaching people who should already know better. But most of all, it's about a mother's love, the kind that moves mountains, changes policies, and refuses to let her child be small in anyone's eyes. If this story moved you, please share it. Someone in your circle needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me, would you have done what Jocelyn did? Would you have had the courage to stand up, speak out, and demand better for your child? And don't forget to subscribe to Earthly Tales for more stories that matter. Stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us that change always starts with one person refusing to accept the way things are. What do you do when your child is hurt by tradition disguised as harmless fun? You fight every single time. Because some battles are worth the discomfort. Some conversations are worth the tension. And some children, your children, are worth protecting, no matter how many people tell you you're overreacting. Jocelyn Price knew that truth in her bones. And because she did, an entire community learned it too. That's the power of one voice. That's the impact of one mother who refused to be silent. Now it's your turn. What traditions in your community need to be questioned? What conversations are you avoiding because they're uncomfortable? Leave a comment. Let's talk about it. Hit that subscribe button. Because these are the stories that change hearts, challenge minds, and remind us all that standing up for what's right is never the wrong choice. See you in the next story. Red Heart,